Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos, Merry Christmas. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are so happy that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you find your podcast. We have an incredibly special episode for you today. We have assembled 7 of the authors from CatholicTeenBooks.com. Antony Kolenc, Andrea Rodgers, AJ Cattapan, Leslea Wahl, Stephanie Engleman, Carolyn Asfalk, and Corinna Turner. They'll be here to read aloud their original short story, Christmas Lights. It's a great story that you are absolutely going to love. Speaking of things that you are going to love, if you are listening to this podcast the day that we publish it, December 25th, 2020, you are going to love Reading in the New Year, our free virtual family literacy fair that can be found at readingintheNewYear.com. We have assembled authors from all over the world to read aloud their books for you and for your family. It's an amazing event. We have built 3 virtual stages where you can watch videos of those authors reading their books aloud, see great performances, and also download hours and hours of fun for you and your family offline. It's fantastic, and it is absolutely free. Find it today. ReadingInTheNewYear.com. It is live as of this moment, and it runs all the way through New Year's Day 2021. Joining us right now from all over the United States and across the pond in the United Kingdom. I am so excited. We are joined today by a group of Catholic teen writers. They have come together to create an original short story that they're going to read to us. I want to introduce them all, but first I want to introduce our friend, who the person who conspired with me to put this all together. Please welcome back to the show our friend Leslea Wahl. Leslea, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having us and letting us try this out. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We had a lot of luck doing this with the spooky middle grade authors, and I thought since we're looking to do something special for the Christmas holiday, why not get together with some Catholic authors to create an original story? And you are part of a great website. Am I right? It's Catholic Teen Authors?
Catholic Teen Books.
Catholic Teen Books. And so you've assembled some of the great authors from that website. Let me introduce them, just kind of go around. We have Antony Kolenc is joining us from Florida. Tony, how are you?
I am doing great. Just glad to be here.
I'm super happy to be here. Tony, by the way, if you're listening, you can't see this. Tony has the most festive virtual background, being in the warmest spot, I think. But that's really cool. Tony, what's the latest book that you want folks to check out?
Well, this year, Loyola Press released book 1 in my Harwood Mysteries series, which is a middle school, high school fiction series. Takes place in 12th century England. Book 1 is Shadow in the Dark. I was very pleased and fortunate enough to get a gold medal from the 2020 Moonbeam Book Awards for that. And book 2, The Haunted Cathedral, is coming out in February. So very excited about that.
Congratulations. The name Loyola is special and near to dear to my heart. I attended Boston College High School, and at that time, the Jesuits had daily mass. There was 3 during each one of the lunch periods. There was an opportunity to celebrate mass in Loyola Chapel, and I took advantage of that most days in my last 2 years at the school when I was really trying hard to do well in school. I was looking for some extra help. But there were some really wonderful moments in that chapel. And so, yeah. Let's also say hi to Andrea Rodgers, who is joining us from New Jersey. Andrea, how are you?
Hello, job great. It's so nice to be here.
Thanks so much for being with us. As I was telling Andrea earlier, I love New Jersey. It's a beautiful, beautiful state, much maligned, unfairly maligned. But it's a great state, and there's all sorts of wonderful schools and churches and different groups that I've had a pleasure to perform for. Andrea, what's the latest book that you want folks to check out?
My latest just came out on September 1st with Harvest House, and it's called Help from Heaven, True Stories of Rescues, Miracles, and Answered Prayers from a First Responder. I volunteer with my local first aid squad, so it's the third book in the series, and I actually have a fourth book under contract.
Wow, that's wonderful. First, thanks so much for serving your community and the greater community. What's the reaction been to this series?
It's been very well received.
That's
and
wonderful.
I think people have enjoyed it, and that makes me feel good to be able to share my experiences with others, and hopefully it'll uplift them.
Yeah. Well, right next to you on my screen, coming to us from Chicago, is AJ Cattapan. AJ, how are you? Thanks for being here.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having us on. This is so much fun.
Now, AJ, what was your thought when Leslea came to you with this crazy idea, telling you that she knew this crazy guy in Boston who came up with this idea, and you want to be a part of it?
Well, I thought it sounded fun. I'm a middle school English teacher, and I've kind of done writing activities like this with my students. And then when Leslea came to me and said, would you do the ending? I said, oh, yeah, sure. And then I realized it's really hard to do the ending.
Well, thank you for taking that challenge on. I'm really looking forward to the ending. I'm looking forward to all the different parts of the story. Joining us from over in the United Kingdom, Corinna Turner. Corinna, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. What part of the UK are you in?
I'm in Gloucestershire, which is next to Wales.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And what books do you want folks to check out from your library of books?
Well, the called A Very Jurassic Christmas.
A Very Jurassic Christmas.
Which is an action-packed, heartwarming It's a story about a young hunter in a future America where dinosaurs roam the wild, and he and his uncle find a very large, fierce, carnivorous dinosaur that's just had chicks in the middle of winter, and they're all starving. So they decide to try and save them by capturing them and taking them to a zoo. But it's very dangerous to put a dinosaur that's sort of 3/4 of the size of a T-Rex in your armoured RV with you and drive south over the Christmas weekend. So it's quite exciting. It's quite heartwarming as well.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous putting a T-Rex of any size into anywhere where a human being is. But this sounds... Now, I'm wondering, a lot of folks think that, religious people, they don't believe in science. And, there are a lot of people who are saying, well, the Earth is just 6,000 years old. There were no such thing as dinosaurs. We know that the Catholic Church doesn't refute science. Have you received any kind of blowback from the theme of your book?
I haven't actually. No.
Great.
Glad to say. I haven't heard anything about that. So.
That's wonderful. Also joining us from Hershey, Pennsylvania, one of the sweetest places in the world, Carolyn Asfalk. Carolyn, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. Thanks so much for inviting us to do this. It's a lot of fun.
Hershey is such a wonderful place. If you've never been to Hershey, you probably won't believe that as you walk around the city and you see the street lights that are shaped like Hershey Kisses, you can actually smell chocolate in the air most days.
You can. On the other days, it smells like manure, but on the good days, it does smell like chocolate. Occasionally, you get a whiff of the Reese's peanut butter cup plant as well. So.
Okay, so I was going to ask you if you ever get annoyed with the smell of chocolate, but if, the alternative, I can see where you'd enjoy the chocolate.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Stephanie Lear Engleman is also, excuse me, Carolyn, I forgot to ask you, which book do you want us to check out?
I think I'd like you to check out All in Good Time, which is a contemporary Catholic romance that I released last year that's picked up a few awards, and it's a traditional romance with the happily ever after, but it has some heavier issues in there, and it involves a widowed mom of 3 young kids and all the chaos that entails, and a young man who's never been married.
I'm wondering, Carolyn, as an author in the romance genre, is your goal, do you have a dream that someday your book is going to be on the Hallmark Channel?
I guess it's crossed my mind, but I don't think about that too much when I'm writing. I kind of write the books I want to read, and if sometime one is made into a movie, that's great. But I kind of like using my own imagination to visualize the characters as well.
That's wonderful. And last but not least on our lineup here, Stephanie Lear Engleman. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having us on, Jed.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I'm excited. What was it, before I ask you what book you want us to check out, what was it that drove you to write Catholic-themed books?
Wow, that's a really loaded question. The long and the short of it is, I guess I love to write, and I wanted to serve God. I wanted to figure out a way that I could glorify Him with the talents and skills that I had. And just one thing led to another, and I received inspiration to write a Catholic teen novel, and I just kind of went with that inspiration, and here I am today.
That's wonderful. And what was that novel?
That novel is A Single Bead. It's the story of a teenage girl whose grandmother has passed away a year before in a terrible plane accident. And when her family goes to the site of the crash to memorialize their grandmother, they begin to pray a rosary, and Caitlin, the teenager, wants absolutely nothing to do with it. So she walks off. But in walking away from her family, she comes across a bead from her grandmother's rosary that's nestled in among some flowers. And it's not just any bead. The rosary was personalized with the initials of all of her children and grandchildren. And Caitlin finds her bead that has her initials.
Oh,
and then
wow.
She goes on to discover that other people have found beads as well, and that they all have mystical, miraculous events associated with them. So then she sets off on a journey to try to find her mother's bead, because her mother is really struggling with her grandmother's death and suffering from depression. And she hopes that by finding this bead, she will be able to help her mother. Ultimately, she learns a lot about the power of prayer and the role of the Blessed Mother in our lives.
Wow. That's beautiful. It really is beautiful. I'm excited. So how this came together, I was chatting with Leslea one time. Leslea comes on once a month, once every 6 weeks or so, and gives us some great recommendations of faith-based books that we may want to read with our tweens and our teens. And I threw this idea out to her and gave her a prompt, and she shared it with this team of 7 writers. Now, each writer wrote their own part and then passed it on to the next person on the list. So Leslea is going to start with us, and the only part of the story that she is familiar with is the section that she wrote. So the only person who knows how the story ends is AJ.
Christmas Lights, Part 1 by Leslea Wahl. Camilla stared out the side window of her family's SUV, watching the snow-covered fields blur past. Every so often, she'd spy a farmhouse in the distance, adorned with festive Christmas lights, although those beacons of holiday cheer amid the long shadows of the fading winter afternoon did little to boost her mood. She, her younger brother Max, and their parents were on their way to spend Christmas with Grandpa, something they didn't normally do, but this Christmas was different. Grandma passed away over the summer, and they weren't about to let Grandpa spend the holiday alone. With each passing mile and field, they not only drew nearer to Grandpa, but also closer to the end of the year. Thank goodness. Camilla pressed her head against the cold window. 2020 had started out with such promise. She'd begun the year by hanging out with a new group of friends. She'd also been preparing for the upcoming spring soccer tryouts and had a shot of making the school's competitive team. And she was pretty sure Jackson Meyer was on the verge of asking her out. Camilla watched the flakes of snow swirling through the air, remembering how great everything had been during those early months of the year. But then it all changed. Her world came crashing down with one word, a word she'd never heard before, COVID, which brought on a slew of other words that had never been part of her vocabulary. Lockdowns, social distancing, masks, online schooling, and just like that, there would be no spring soccer season, no hanging out with friends, and no possible dates with Jackson. Instead, she was stuck at home with her brother and parents. Then came the devastating news that her beloved grandmother had died. Camilla still couldn't believe the family hadn't even been allowed to have a decent funeral. Then the school year came, which was usually an exciting time, but it brought modified schedules, periodic online classes, and few social interactions, completely ruining her new friendships. The best year of her life had transformed into some depressing dystopian world. Needless to say, after so much disappointment, finding something to feel festive about proved difficult. Wow, this storm is really getting bad. Dad's tense voice drew Camilla from her thoughts. Snow violently pelted the windshield. Dad's grip on the steering wheel turned his knuckles the same color as the unexpected blizzard. We can't see anything. This is too dangerous to be driving in. Mom turned her worried expression toward Dad. He nodded in agreement. There's a town coming up. We should stop and let the storm pass. The tense minutes ticked by as we slowly continued through the raging snowstorm. No one uttered a word as the swirling snow made the rest of the world disappear. Max, who's usually full of jokes, turned to look at Camilla with wide, terrified eyes. When the green exit sign came into view, the family let out a collective sigh of relief. Dad steered the vehicle off the highway, the whiteout decreasing the visibility by the moment. As the SUV reached the top of the incline of the off-ramp, it suddenly began to fishtail. Dad struggled to control the vehicle. They spun sideways, but eventually came to a stop. Then, in one terrifying moment, the SUV resumed sliding backwards. Camilla slammed against her seat as the SUV bumped down an embankment. She squeezed her eyes shut and prayed a Hail Mary. With an abrupt jolt, the vehicle stopped moving. Camilla looked out the window as understanding flooded through her. They'd slid off the road and were now stuck in a ditch.
Part 2 by Andrea Jo Rodgers. At least Camilla thought it was a ditch, but now, as their SUV began teetering back and forth, she realized with horror that they were dangling off the edge of a cliff. "Hold on, everyone," she shouted. The SUV lurched, and suddenly they were free-falling. Mom's piercing screams filled the evening air. Camilla uttered a simple, silent prayer. "Save us, God." After what was only seconds, but seemed like an eternity, the SUV slammed into the ground. Tree branches exploded through the rear window. Camilla was thrown violently forward and then backwards within the confines of her seatbelt. The SUV suddenly became ominously quiet. A cloud of powdery white snow blew up into the air, surrounding them. Mom? Dad? Max? Silence. Panic bubbled up inside Camilla, threatening to suffocate her. She called their names again, but there was no response. Miraculously, Camilla was unharmed. She unstrapped her seatbelt and turned towards Max. His eyes fluttered open. "My ankle, I think it's broken," he whimpered. "It's going to be okay, buddy," she said. She turned her attention to her parents in the front seats. She saw the rise and fall of their chests and could hear that they were breathing. They were unconscious, but thank God they were alive. Camilla pulled her cell phone out of her pocket. No signal. She feared no one would ever find them here. They would surely freeze to death. She stared out the frosty window and blinked. Then she blinked again. There before her, swirling in the snow, was an image of Grandma. She looked beautiful and radiant, just the way Camilla remembered her. "Grandma?" she asked tentatively. She reached out and touched the glass. Suddenly, a voice inside her head seemed to say, "Follow the Christmas lights." She blinked again. The image of Grandma was gone. Max's voice broke into Camilla's thoughts. "Are Mom and Dad dead?" "No, but they are unconscious. I'm going to go for help. It's going to be your job to take care of them," Camilla said. Mom always kept an old laundry basket filled with emergency supplies in the rear of the SUV. Although the back of their vehicle was crushed, Camilla was able to reach back and retrieve much of the contents of the basket. She placed blankets over her parents and Max. "I'm going to take the flashlight with me because it's going to grow dark soon." Suddenly, missing the soccer season and struggling through online classes seemed trivial. Now, Camilla found herself thrust into a desperate struggle between life and death. Her only chance to save her family and herself was to forge into the unknown and pray she could somehow find help. She thought of Grandpa. He'd already lost Grandma this year. She couldn't let him lose the rest of his family. Maybe, once he realized they were late, he'd call the police department to come find them. But even if he did, how would they ever spot them down here at the bottom of a ravine? An image of Jackson Meyer's face passed through Camilla's mind. She thought of her friends, both old and new. Spring soccer team tryouts were only 3 months away. She had a lot to live for.
Part 3, written by Stephanie Engleman. The car had fallen at an angle, with Camilla's side at its highest point. She had to throw her weight up and into the door to finally heave it open and climb from the vehicle, but at last was free. Grateful she'd worn boots and a warm coat, she scrabbled up the side of the ravine and to the street, hoping against hope that a car might pass by and offer help. No such luck. Straining her eyes to peer through the white curtain of snow, Camilla couldn't make out a single headlight. Apparently, every other driver on the road had decided to seek shelter and wait out the storm, just as Mom and Dad had planned to do. "Follow the Christmas lights," Grandma had said. The vision had been so surreal, Camilla wondered now if she had been hallucinating. Regardless, it seemed like good advice. The trouble was, the thickening snow hid any tiny twinkles of light she might have been able to see. Once again, Camilla looked up and down the road, this time trying to gain her bearings. Recognizing the exit ramp Dad had been attempting to use, she followed its length, trudging through snow already well above her ankles, until it finally teed into a narrow road. Mom had said there was a town coming up, but there was no sign to indicate which direction she should turn. Camilla stood for a long moment, staring right and then left, then right again, hoping for some indication of which way she should go. Glancing back toward the ravine that held her family, she let out a desperate groan. There was no time to waste, she knew, but turning left or right would make all the difference in the world. "Okay, God," she finally said out loud as the snow began to gather on her shoulders. "I know it's been a while since we talked, but I could really use some help right now." There had been a time not so long ago when Camilla would have expected a response, a time when talking to God had been a regular part of her life, when she'd felt his guiding hand guiding her decisions, friendships, and activities. But that had been a time when she'd looked forward to seeing friends at youth group, when going to Mass had been the Sunday routine, when soccer season was a given and school days would have been long and boring had it not been for the constant presence of friends. Now, when she saw her friends, their faces were obscured by masks, their voices muffled by fabric. Mass was a strange affair, free from singing, with assigned seating and firm instructions to disinfect your pew. School, though open for a few months, had shut down again, leaving her holed up in her bedroom to learn alone, with only the questionable merits of video conference calls to break up the monotony. As if taking away her friends, her school, and most of her activities hadn't been enough, 2020 had also taken away her beloved Grandma. Right, God. I should have known better than to think you're going to listen. Not this year. Maybe next. Resolved, Camilla turned to her right and took a step into the snowy unknown.
Part 4 by Carolyn Asfalk.
She swung the flashlight, the dim blur of illuminated snow preventing her from seeing more than a few yards ahead. A breeze kicked snow across the roadway, battering her side and stinging her cheek. Cold and wetness seeped into her shoes, making her toes tingle. The SUV would be insulated by snow and out of the wind, but how long would blankets keep her family warm? Tears stung her eyes, but she squeezed them closed and swallowed. She would not cry. Getting hysterical wouldn't help. Come on, God, please. A warbled call echoed behind her, making her glad she'd chosen right, not left. The only animals she'd spotted from the car had been cows, but coyotes probably roamed these parts. The flashlight dimmed, and her chest tightened as she beat it against her leg. No, no, no! It couldn't go dead. It flickered and brightened, and Camilla sighed, a puff of white breath mingling with the falling snow. She scanned the roadside, searching for Christmas lights. A low rumble sounded behind her, mechanical, not animal. Walking backward, within seconds blurred headlights came into view, high off the ground. She nearly squealed with excitement. Ordinarily, she'd be leery of accepting help from a stranger, but lives depended on her getting help, soon. Maybe God had heard her reluctant prayer after all. The vehicle's engine resounded as it approached, and Camilla waved her arms, the flashlight's weak beam cutting through the snowfall. A hulking green Humvee came into focus, maintaining its speed, its lights nearly blinding her. "Hey, I need help!" she shouted over the engine noise and snow crunching under heavy tires. The Humvee rolled by, as if the driver hadn't seen her. A sob choked her as the red taillights rolled ahead. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and she rambled every rote prayer she could recall. A half-dozen prayers in, something shimmered in the distance. Yellows, reds, greens, Christmas lights. She blinked, willing her eyes to focus through the falling snow. Yes, something tall wrapped in lights, a cylinder. Silo? Yes, a silo. A snow-covered wooden fence came into view, and she jogged alongside it, the lights sharpening with every step. A break in the fence signaled a driveway. Deep tracks coming from the opposite lane created ruts with only a thin layer of powder on top. Someone had driven through, probably only minutes ago. Hope surged, and she jogged faster despite the ache in her near-frozen feet. More twinkling lights hung from a farmhouse roof. A barn blanketed in snow stood next door. A horse whinnied, and oh, thank God, a voice, low and soothing, responded. Camilla skidded to a stop in the barn's open doorway, her shoes catching where the earth met concrete. She teetered, her arms flailing, and yelped. A guy, around her age, turned from where he stood by a stall. He stared as she steadied herself and then peered beyond her. Can I help you? Could he help her? Overwhelmed by relief, she almost laughed. Yes, my dad lost control of our car at the exit. She jerked a thumb toward the highway. We went over a cliff. My brother's hurt and my parents are unconscious. She gasped, exhausted from running in the bitter cold. He rounded the stall, worry creasing his forehead. I'll get help. He snatched a set of keys from a hook, tucked them in a pocket, and started in the direction of the farmhouse. I'll be right back, he called, then stopped, turning. I'm Garrison, by the way.
Part 5 by Antony Kolenc. He was cute. Not as cute as Jackson, of course, but what could he do to save Mom and Dad and Max? Wait, she said, can't you just call 911 or get an adult to help? Garrison shook his head. That ice storm on Monday took down the only cell tower around here, and my Uncle Ben got rid of our landline before COVID. He's still at work right now. Just hang tight. With that, he disappeared into the swirling veil of snow. She waited in the deep freeze for what seemed like an eternity. He figures this would be Christmas Eve 2020. Grandma used to say that God worked in mysterious ways. Well, this night, this whole year actually, was a mystery. What good had God brought from it? The year was going to end as cold and unforgiving as the pandemic itself. Just then a loud engine echoed from under the Christmas lights. Garrison. A black-framed snowmobile glided toward her, polluting the silence with its ugly roar and spraying wet snow up the sides of her legs as it slid to a stop. Hop on, Garrison shouted, holding out a blue helmet that matched his own. In his lap was a fire-red kit marked First Aid, except her family was going to need a lot more than a Band-Aid to survive this storm. There was no time to argue. She muscled the tight helmet over her head, her hair was already ruined anyway, and pulled herself up behind him, locking her arms around his chest. The snowmobile lurched forward as a blast of icy air stung her neck. They raced toward the crash. Garrison seemed to know the way from her earlier description. When they finally arrived at the site, they tossed their helmets to the roadside. The snow had already covered most of the evidence from where the SUV had slid into the ditch. "Wait here," Garrison said, taking the first aid kit and scooting down the ravine, mostly using his backside and his strong gloved hands. Soon he was at the SUV, opening the angled driver's side door and reaching in with his flashlight. It sounded like he was talking to Max, whose whiny voice had risen another octave, probably due to the pain. Garrison's face was grim when he scrambled back up a few minutes later. "Your parents are still unconscious, and your brother's ankle's in bad shape. We need to get them to a hospital. There's one off the next exit." But how could they get them there? Not on a snowmobile. They'd have to ride to the hospital and lead the ambulance back to the crash. By then, Mom and Dad could be dead. That's when a vehicle approached with blinding lights. There it was again, that same green Humvee that ignored her pleas for help. It was large enough to fit her whole family inside, no doubt. "Look," she called to Garrison. He peered toward the Humvee and shook his head. "That's Mr. Harris. That guy won't help anyone anymore. He's scared to death of catching COVID." Sure enough, the Humvee again seemed unwilling to stop. The old man behind the wheel was all masked up, too, with a clear face shield added for good measure. Yet there, from the mirror on his windshield, hung a tiny string of Christmas lights. Wasn't that a sign from Grandma? Maybe even from God? "He'll help us," Camilla yelled. "I know it. You have to stop him." Garrison didn't hesitate at her command. He jumped into the road, shining the flashlight into Mr. Harris's windshield and waving his arms like a madman.
Part 6 by Corinna Turner. The Humvee swerved around Garrison, accelerated, and was lost in the snow. Camilla stared after it, numb with disappointment. Not a sign from God, then. Just a hallucination from the shock. She glanced at Garrison, who was biting his lip. "I guess I'll have to take them back to the house one by one," he said. "But it's going to be difficult. Do you have any straps in the car?" Camilla frowned, trying to remember. It was a crazy plan. What if Mom or Dad fell off? But what else could they do? Maybe in the trunk. "I'll go look." Garrison moved toward the slope again. "Stay there in case another car comes." Relieved not to have to get in the snow again when her legs were already so cold, Camilla stayed put. Eventually, Garrison's voice carried faintly over the howling wind, tinged with frustration and despair. "I can't find anything." "Oh no, how would they—" The hum of an engine suddenly penetrated the snowfall, headlights dazzling Camilla as a vehicle pulled to a halt. Green, and a Humvee. For real? Yes, there was the old man lowering the window. She rushed to the driver's door. "Please help! Our car slid off the road, and my parents are unconscious, and my little brother's broken his ankle." "Ah, heck." The old man's frail voice seemed strange coming from such a huge vehicle, and she had to strain to hear. "I'm sorry I drove past, kiddo, but I'm immunocompromised. But I guess—" He hesitated. Camilla waited, hardly daring to breathe. He'd come back specially, right? "I guess there ain't nothing for it. Can you and that young man get them into the back? I can't do much these days." "Of course," said Camilla quickly. "We can manage, and we can put masks on. Just stay there, please." "Relax, kiddo. I'm staying." The old man sounded resigned. "God gave me a right talking to, well, metaphorically.
Well, never mind now. Just get those injured folks in here. You bet. Camilla slid down the slope at top speed. Garrison, Mr. Harris came back. He what? But Garrison swung straight into action, wrapping Camilla's mom in blankets, before dragging her up the slope single-handed. He needed Camilla's help with her dad. Then the two of them were able to assist Max. Once they were finally inside, with the doors closed, Camilla flopped in the front seat and sighed in relief, not even caring if it dampened the mask she now wore. She'd never been so glad to be in a warm vehicle. Mr. Harris pulled away quickly. I'll take you straight to the emergency room. It's only 2 miles on from my place. As they rolled along, Garrison checking on her parents now and then, in a way that suggested he knew more about first aid than she did, Max's head soon drooped onto Garrison's shoulder. Camilla's eyelids grew heavy too, despite her worry for Mum and Dad. It was so lovely and warm. A screeching, smashing impact, and Camilla started awake as she was thrown sideways against her seatbelt. Mr. Harris was wrestling the careering car back into a straight line, gasping in shock and exertion. Dazed, Camilla stared at the hood, where one corner was scrunched up. What happened? Some idiot lost control and smacked right into us, wheezed the old man. Heck, that was close. Thank God they were all okay. But the Humvee was sputtering and shuddering, losing speed. As the vehicle inched along, slower and slower, Mr. Harris whispered under his breath. Prayers or swears, Camilla couldn't tell. Finally, he swung off onto a driveway. We're not going to make it. This is my place. I don't have a landline, but, young man, you can harness up a team, right? If I tell you what to do. A team? Max half sobbed the question. What do you mean? Horses, said Garrison. Mr. Harris has some fine horses. That I do. Can't ride them any more, but the local girls take care of exercising them. But harness them to what? Camilla asked. Nothing will get through this. Sure it will, if it's made for it. I've got a good big sleigh. It's Santa's sleigh in the parade, most years. It'll get you and your folks there quick enough. A sleigh? Camilla's heart leapt. God really was looking after them. Very much in his own way.
Part 7 by A.J. Cattapan. Camilla didn't know how they did it. At every step, she nearly toppled over with exhaustion, but somehow she and Garrison managed to get everyone onto the sleigh and harness a team of horses under Mr. Harris's directions. The sleigh bumped over a mile of hilly countryside before entering a small town and pulling up to the local hospital. Mr. Harris turned to Garrison. Young man, you help this kiddo get her family checked in. I'll wait out here and take you home once you're ready. The next few minutes were a flurry of activity as doctors and nurses rushed out to get Camilla's parents and brother off the sleigh and onto gurneys. Camilla turned to follow them when Garrison tugged on her coat sleeve. Here. He shoved a small card into her gloved hand. I don't know when the cell tower will be back up, but here's my number if you need anything. Camilla looked up at Garrison, his face etched in concern. Thank you, she smiled faintly. She wanted to say more, but her family was being wheeled through the doors. She glanced at them before looking back at Garrison, but he was already climbing onto Mr. Harris's sleigh. She waved at them both before shoving Garrison's card into her front jean pocket without even looking at it. The snowfall was easing up, but she doubted that cell tower would be fixed anytime soon. Camilla rushed through the automatic doors of the hospital. She watched as her parents and brother were wheeled away to different rooms. After being examined briefly by another doctor to make sure she didn't have any injuries, Camilla found herself back in the waiting room. Half the seats had been roped off for social distancing, and the few remaining seats were already occupied. An elderly man slumped in a wheelchair and dozed while a woman beside him read a book. A mom held a crying baby. Camilla looked at the clock above the nurse's station. 7:30? They were supposed to have been at Grandpa's for dinner 2 hours ago. Camilla ran up to the nurse. Please tell me you have a working landline. I have to get a hold of my grandpa. The nurse looked up from her computer. Her eyes twinkled over her mask. You're the girl who came in on the sleigh, right? Camilla nodded. The nurse picked up the phone. Tell me your grandpa's number, and I'll try ringing his line. Camilla waited nervously as the nurse dialed the number. What must Grandpa be thinking? He must be worried sick about them. The nurse hung up the phone. Sorry, sweetie, there's no answer. Why don't you take a seat and I'll try later? Where exactly should I sit? Camilla indicated the lack of empty seats behind her. I know the perfect place, said the nurse. She pointed to the wall on her right. Follow the signs for the chapel. I'll send someone if there's any change with the family. The chapel? Camilla rolled her eyes. She didn't really want to, but there seemed no place left for her. After a few turns down some winding hallways, Camilla entered a simple chapel where a dozen seats faced a table covered with a white cloth in front of some stained glass windows. With a sigh, Camilla sat down on one of the wooden chairs with a padded seat. What now, God? How could he do this to her? This had truly been the worst year ever, and now she was going to spend Christmas Eve in a hospital chapel while her parents fought for their lives, and her grandpa was nowhere to be found. Tears rolled down her cheeks one after another until she slumped onto the floor, sobbing. She sat there, letting her heart pour out to God as the tears continued to flow. After what seemed like an eternity, Camilla picked herself up and sat back on the chair. She reached into her pocket to see if she had a tissue. Instead, she pulled out the card Garrison had given her. She hadn't even looked at it when she shoved it in her pocket, but now she realized he'd handed her a prayer card. On one side was a muscular-looking angel with a sword held high above his head. On the other was a prayer entitled, Prayer to St. Michael. Memories of a youth group session came back to her. Wasn't St. Michael the archangel who always came to fight battles? Did they have to be war-type battles, or could they be the fighting for your life type? Camilla figured it was worth a shot. What did she have to lose? She whispered the words to the prayer in the silence of the hospital chapel. Moments later, her phone buzzed. Startled, Camilla pulled it from her pocket and spotted a text message. Camilla, it's Garrison. I have a Christmas surprise for you. Meet me at the entrance. Camilla blinked. How could this be? She still wasn't receiving any cell signal. Oh well, she might as well check the entrance. If nothing else, she could ask the nurse to try Grandpa's line again. There was no need to ask the nurse to call Grandpa, for when Camilla got to the entrance, Grandpa was walking through the door while Mr. Harris stood just outside. Grandpa, Camilla cried as she rushed to hug him. Camilla, my dear. Grandpa enveloped her in his arms. He smelled of fresh firewood and coffee. I'm so glad you're all right. Camilla sobbed again. St. Michael must have heard her prayer. Everything would be okay now. She knew that. If Grandpa could get to the hospital, then somehow God would fix everything else. After catching her breath, Camilla pulled away to look up at the gentle face of her grandfather. But how did you get here? It was Mr. Harris found me as I was trying to clear the driveway. He told me I had to get in a sleigh, said he knew where you were, and I had to come with him. Camilla looked through the glass door at Mr. Harris standing in the cold in his mask and face shield. As if drawn by a magnet, Camilla left her grandfather's side and headed for the door. She thought maybe Garrison would be out there too, but he was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Harris, how did you know where my grandfather lived? Mr. Harris chuckled behind his mask. That friend of yours told me. Said I simply had to get your grandfather and bring him straight to the hospital. Said it wasn't right for a family that had been through so much to be separated at Christmas. But how did Garrison know where my grandpa lived? Mr. Harris tilted his head. Garrison? You mean that young man who was with you? Of course. Who else would I be talking about? Mr. Harris reached up and scratched his head. I thought there was something a little odd about that boy when he disappeared off in the snow like that. Mr. Harris, what on earth are you talking about? Sorry, kiddo. I don't know what that young man told you, but when I asked him his name, he told me it was Michael.
Bravo. What a beautiful, beautiful story, and such a wonderful Wonderful ending. Congratulations to all of you. That was wonderful.
Nice ending, AJ.
Yeah,
nice ending.
Yeah, a fantastic ending. And Corinna, the sleigh. I never expected the sleigh.
Neither did I. I was like, what am I going to do with a sleigh?
I hope it wouldn't be too difficult for you.
Where did that inspiration come from, Corinna? Was it just like divine inspiration, or was it there was kind of evil, like, I'm going to give it to AJ here. Just let's see what you can do with this.
No, I think it was the Holy Spirit. I was kind of trying to plot out my part, and I was thinking, this is a bit boring, surely it's a Christmas story, something more has got to happen. And then I thought, sleigh. Yeah, but I didn't have enough words to write any more about the sleigh, so I had to dump it on Amy. So.
Well, it's really wonderful. I'm curious, Leslea. You started this ball rolling. Now hearing the complete story for the first time, what's your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. Ever since I wrote it, I just couldn't wait for this day because I wanted to know what everyone came up with. I know everyone's so talented, so I just couldn't imagine where it would go. So this was such a fun time. We might have to do this again or something.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Andrea, after having this experience, is this the first time you've done anything like this? And now that it's finished, is this something you might want to do in the future?
Absolutely. It is the first time I've ever done a collaborative story like this before, and I thought it was so much fun, and I can't wait till the telecast when my children can listen to it with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole family.
Carolyn, what about you? What's your thinking on this collaborative process? Is this something new for you? Is it something that you enjoyed?
Yeah, it's totally new, and I'm just so impressed with how much everybody brought their own unique twist and a different element to the story that really made it so full and beautiful. It was a tremendous amount of fun. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Tony, being the only male voice in this story, did you find it strange? Isn't the word, but did you find it challenging? To kind of fit into, what was a story that was written predominantly by women.
Yeah, I was surprised with all these women. Not one of them mentioned how cute Garrison was, and I felt like that really needed to be represented. And
that's right.
But
Tony, when is your YA romance coming out? Because I laughed when I got to Tony's part. His first 3 words were he was cute, and I'm like, we have all these YA romance authors in the group, and Tony's first 3 words are he was cute. And then there was the strong gloved hand and the little riding on the snowmobile. So Tony, you let us know when your YA romance is coming out.
Had I realized he was going to be St. Michael, I probably wouldn't have had him take his shirt off like that.
Oh, I see Stephanie is laughing, and she looks like she's having a lot of fun. Am I right? Was this a fun experience for you, Stephanie?
Oh, it was so much fun. It exceeded my wildest expectations. These authors, I just want to go out and buy every one of your books and hunker down and spend these cold days reading them. So I'm going to build a fire and go to the bookstore. Maybe not in that order.
Oh, man. And this can go out to anybody who wants to take it. There may be somebody out there listening and, thinking, if there really was a God, would he really, make Camilla go through that, losing her grandmother and falling down the cliff? And this is just all coincidence. And, why do we have to muddy up this story with faith and an angel coming down? I don't know. Would anybody have an answer to that person?
I think there's an answer kind of in a recent gospel passage, and I can't remember which day this week it was, but maybe it was just yesterday, talking about what our foundation, the house, what is our life built on? What's the foundation of our house? The hard times are going to come whether you have a faith life or not, right? And we just all, that's life. Life is full of hard things. And if you've got that foundation, though, then you've got something to stand firm on. Otherwise, you're like the house that's built on sand and you're going to wash away. And I think one of the things that's just really helped me throughout this pandemic is the fact that I turn to prayer all the time. As we're recording right behind me, this is my prayer corner. This is where all my prayer books are. This is where my prayer journal is. And when times get tough, I've got a foundation to stand on. So it's not like God's throwing these hard things at us. Life just is hard. But what are you going to use when those hard times come to keep you strong and grounded?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, Jed, the prompt was about a girl who had a tough year because of COVID. And that's a controversial topic. A lot of people don't want to deal with it anymore. We're kind of all done with it. But I thought it was really a good one because so many teens, that has been their life. It's all been an upheaval this whole year. So it was nice to have that, and then we could kind of show how you can move past that. And, there are problems in life, and it's not unique to just them. Mm-hmm. But if you turn to faith, you can get through it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we are going to be dealing with the memories and the scars of COVID for a generation or two. But AJ, I want to get back to you. One of the things is you were talking about foundation and the fact that we're all going to go through hard times. And reminded, I just had a lovely chat yesterday with one of the international kids who've come and called our home their home for a short time. She was a young woman from China. She's now studying in Australia. She came to our home when she was 15. And I remember and this studio was her room when she was here. And I remember her dad brought her into to see the room and her home. And she was moving in with us because she had a very horrible experience in her first host family. And her dad didn't speak English. Was really excited and was telling Jing to translate for him. And he said, God brought us here. God brought you to this home. And I said to Jing, I was really excited. He goes, wow, you guys, you have faith. You believe in God. And Jing said, I don't. He does. I don't. And as we're, having Jing, every problem, every difficulty that she faced that year was monumental. I mean, it was just horrible. Everything, it was, someone looked at her the wrong way and it was like the world was falling apart. We've stayed in touch and now she's in university and it's been 7 years since she was with us. But as I'm talking to her now, she still has problems, but she has faith now. She didn't necessarily get it here, but I think there were seeds planted. Her family is Muslim, and she stayed here with the Christian family, and then she lived in Japan for a time. And now every time we speak, she talks about, well, God protected me. God gives me some hope. And I don't know what she calls herself. I don't know what label she would put herself in, but she has that foundation now. And now when she tells me of what's going on in her life and things aren't perfect, she's not falling apart. She understands that she can deal with it.
Yeah, sounds like she's finding that foundation to stand on, because we're gonna have those problems, right? Yep. But that's great that she's finding something to rest on that's going to help change her perspective, right? Mm-hmm. We're still going to look at the world, but it's how we look at the world. And when we look at it through a faith lens, I think that's when we can find the courage to keep going and face the challenges.
Absolutely. Well, I want to encourage everybody to look through a faith lens and because we do see a light at the end of the tunnel. It's coming. I'm not going to say it's coming quickly, but it's coming. In the meantime, I'm going to encourage everybody listening to look through their little magical lens that brings them out into the world, and check out all the websites of our authors. So I'm just going to go around and first start with Tony. Tony, where can folks go to find out more about you and your work?
Well, my website is antonykolenc.com, which, of course, who can spell that? But you can find Shadow in the Dark on Amazon or Loyola Press, and there's links to everything on there.
Awesome. Andrea Rodgers, where can we find you on the web?
My website is AndreaJoRodgers.com. That's Rodgers has a D in it. And also my books are on Amazon too if you want to read a little bit more about them. They're also explained on my website. My middle grade books are Saving Mount Rushmore and Saving the Statue of Liberty. And ironically, they are part of the St. Michael the Archangel Academy. So I was very excited that he played a role in the end of our story today.
That's awesome. Carolyn, where can we find your website?
My website is CarolynAsfalk.com, and all my books are there, and I have a lot of recommendations for reading Catholic fiction there as well, all in my blog.
Awesome. Hey, Corinna, where can folks find you?
You can find my books on IamMargaret.com or on Amazon or other stores.
That's wonderful. Stephanie Lear Engleman, where can we find you?
My website is Stephanie Engleman, and it's ENGELMAN.com. And of course, my books are on Amazon. A Single Bead is published by Pauline Books and Media, so you can find it there or in your local Catholic bookstore, which I love to give a shout out to.
Awesome. And you said one of your books was published by Pauline?
Mm-hmm.
I love the Pauline sisters. I've studied with a number of them. They're wonderful, and they have a great presence here in the city, in Archdiocese of Boston.
Right.
AJ, where can we find your books?
So my website is ajcattapan.com, and my last name is spelled pretty much like you would think. It's the word cat, T-A, and then P-A-N. And I don't think I got to mention one of my books at the beginning. So just really quickly, I have a middle grade mystery called 7 Riddles to Nowhere about a boy saving his Catholic school from closing by winning a riddle solving contest. And then this is why my ending should really be no surprise. My YA novel is called Angelhood, and it's about a teenage guardian angel trying to earn her wings. So you can look those up at ajcattapan.com.
Awesome. And last but not least, the person who pulled this all together, Leslea Wahl. Leslea, remind everybody where they can find you and your books.
Sure. My website is my name, Leslea Wahl. My name's spelled a little different, but I'm sure it'll be on your link. And all of our websites can be linked through CatholicTeenBooks.com on the About page. It tells a little bit about our bios and has links to all our websites. And then all of our books, along with all the other authors, are listed on there too. So a great resource.
We've had an amazing Christmas celebration with 7 of the CatholicTeenBooks.com authors. My friends, thank you all very, very much. I hope you all have a very blessed and happy Christmas.
Thank
you.
you.
You too, Jeff.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas, everyone.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Brad Swift. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. The authors from CatholicTeenBooks.com, Antony Kolenc, Andrea Rodgers, AJ Cattapan, Leslea Wahl, Stephanie Engleman, Carolyn Asfalk, and Corinna Turner. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, but most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been an incredible 2020, hasn't it? But you've hung in there. We've done this together. Things are going to get better together. And thank you so much for making the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.